I've been interested in politics from the time I was a young boy. I remember I was born in 1946. The My first real understanding of political issues, I would say, struck me about when I was 10 years old. In 1956, we had the longest, most militant sets of strikes from Fancy all the way down to Bayaboo. Also on the leeward side on the estates, but mainly from Fancy all the way down to Bayaboo. And my area, Connery Estate, Bellevue Estate, Goss, Mount William, Daddy Dandrad, Arrow Factory up in Park Hill, the whole area, the agricultural workers turned out. It was a militant strike, and also persons who broke the strike were subject, unfortunately, to some violence. Ebenezer Joshua, then the labor leader, growing to the heights of his popularity. And I remember him coming to the Connery police station, which is just across from, almost adjacent to where I was living at the time, the family home of my parents. And I went out into the station yard, across the road, and I saw Ebenezer Joshua close up. And I used to see him riding his bicycle. Georgetown, going down through Connery and going down to Mungren and Bellevue, Mungren and the like. And I heard him talk, and he was talking about colonialism and the plantation system, and how workers have to fight for their rights. He had come to bail some people who had been detained by the police. And that piqued my interest, because, as a youngster, I'm observing things around me, watching what is happening on the estates, seeing how people lived. In those days, people didn't have pipe-borne water in their homes. You had standpipes. You used to bathe at the river, wash in the river, wash clothes in the river. Electricity was not for everybody. In fact, around that time when I was 10 years old, we didn't have electricity at our house. And so I used to have to study with tilly lamp. Only rich people could have afforded water closets, so everybody had pit toilets. The kitchen was outside. We had hall and chamber house. You were a little better off if you had a little wall house and galvanized on the roof, or shingle. Got a lot of houses in Connery, particularly on the side of the estate, but not only there, which were wooden houses with thatch roofs. Old man beard grass on the roof of the houses. As far as I remember, there was no radio station no radio in the village. Two radios came a little later, around the time 1959, 1960, when West Indies cricket team played England here in the Caribbean, and Mr. Latham, who had come from Aruba, Curacao, had brought back either a Paya or a Philips radio, one of these Dutch radio, the box radio with the tubes. And my father had a Grundig, which was a German radio Mr. Connell used to be the agent for Grundig. Mr. Connell, God bless his soul. That's Chester Connell people them. And so of course, you didn't have all these radio stations, as you know, the only WIBS, Windward Island Broadcasting Service, which was headquartered in Grenada, and there was a substation here. They only broadcast for certain hours on medium wave and particular hours. So my first set of politics was from Joshua, Ebenezer Joshua. I started to follow him, and I liked his politics very much because he was defending the poor and the working people. And as I say, I was observing too. I was a sensitive boy, a sensitive child. And then there was an old man in the village, Mr. Doyle. I remember him very well. Mr. Doyle had gone to Cuba to cut cane. He was a poor man, dignified. He used to, I could still see him, tall, in black pants, a see-through Tyrolean shirt with a merino underneath, button down. Either wearing gunslinger, I used to call them flip-flops, or a white soft mash, the canvas. As I say, dignified. Poor as a church mouse, but wise. And he and I took a liking to each other, in part because his daughter, Edna, used to help my mother do some washing and ironing. And Edna had a child, I'm told, around the same age as I was when I was a baby, and when my mother was busy in her shop. And I'm told that when Edna was feeding her baby, and I'm crying, he will be on one of the mammaries, and I am another on the mammaries. So I read about those things happening, and people consider them strange, but
you know them. You've lived them.
I lived it. So, but Mr. Doyle, youngsters used to watch Mr. Doyle very strangely. He had a little beard, white hair. But we used to sit on the wall at the bridge, the entrance at Connery Bridge. Mornings, when I'm going to bathe in the river, or afternoons when I'm finished school, or in the early evening and the like. He talked to me about all kind of things. I mean, he made me understand that there was a world outside of Britain and British colonialism, and that there was Cuba and the Dominican Republic and Panama and the United States of America. In other words, there was a world outside, and opened my mind to these things, and would talk to me about different things. For instance, I had the impression that a republic was a terrible place of crime and so on, and disorder. And he'd tell me, well, America is a republic. I didn't know that. I thought it was only Cuba is a republic in the days of the Batista regime and what was happening in Venezuela, because you tended to get stories with Venezuela, because after all, the folk song had said, Matilda, Matilda, she take me money and run Venezuela. That is when Matilda left her man and took his money. He didn't go to Tokyo or London or New York or Vladivostok. He went down the road, just down the road. She just went down the road to Venezuela. So Mr. Doyle opened my eyes to many things. I reflect on many sayings of his, and I often quote him at meetings. Sometimes I don't attribute the wisdom to him, but I will remember things what he told me as a boy. So all of that helped to shape my own political education. My father was very partial to Ebenezer Joshua. My mother was not so partial to Joshua. She even though she liked Joshua, I don't think she particularly liked Mammy Josh. And then you found those kinds of divisions would take place. And there are lots of politics would have been discussed in that period, because this was a time of constitutional decolonization. In 1957, the full ministerial system came into being, and in 1960-61, the office of chief minister arose. But I remember as a boy, even the pre-ministerial system, when you had a committee, I remember George Hamilton Charles, he had printed some exercise books. Because he was a kind of a minister, not quite a minister, but a sort of pre-ministerial system, but he was in the executive council responsible for education. So he will distribute, used to represent our constituency, so he used to distribute in our area exercise books with his face on top of the cover. So I remember getting George Charles' copybook, and so you get to understand the politics, and I learned a lot of politics through listening to spiritual Baptist meetings. Because they were tied up with a message of liberation and freedom, and gave interpretations of the Bible which were tuned to the poor and the underprivileged. I used to hear things from the street corners with the spiritual Baptist preaching, which I didn't hear in the Catholic Church. So all of those things, all those set of influences came upon us. And there were teachers who will talk about things, what was happening around you. So that is in all these different sources that we gain political information, and people will talk about what happened from the 1930s. My uncle, for instance, was a local leader in the Byra area in the 1935 uprising. Reputedly, he was very good at math. Uncle Peter, he was murdered when I was a little boy. In fact, he was murdered just on the land just above where I now live at Goss, just up in that area. So every time I go up there, I remember Uncle Peter. So all these set of influences help to shape you.
Incidentally, Prime Minister, you spoke about the bicycle that Joshua owned and used to ride, and this evening's program is really about the lighter side of the
Yes.
Prime Minister, and I'm sure you know where I'm going with this
Yes.
bicycle. I am sure you know where I'm going with the bicycle.
Your grandfather bicycle helped to mash up my left ankle, because
That's bad business for me, Prime Minister.
Diego Warrican, who had a bicycle. He was your father's father. He used to was a young tradesman, and his bicycle in those days, you had two sets of bicycle, Rally and Humber. He had a Rally, and it had a carrier, and he used to like to give me a ride on the carrier. And the bridge at Connery wasn't as flat as it is now, or even the one before. It had it had an incline. In fact, when you come in from the Kingston side, the southern side of the bridge, you really couldn't see who was coming from the northern side of the bridge because there was an elevation and there was a drop on the other side. So he's riding the bike and I was behind and he was coming off the hill from Connery Bridge, going to the northern side. And my foot slipped off because I used to put it on two little abutments,
Right.
And my foot slipped off and went inside of the spokes. And in fact, they fixed up my foot. But later on, I was to discover that it left me, my right leg, a little shorter, because I don't think they did a good as job as they ought to have done. And it's the Cubans, interestingly, who discovered that. Because as the years go by, you'd watch me walking with a certain bump and leaning to the right side like an old Saga boy, like how they used to walk. It isn't that I was giving a Saga boy walk, but it's that the right foot, the right leg is a little bit shorter, and as you get older, it affects the hips and so on, so that and where it was giving me difficulties, they discovered it. They did all sorts of tests, but finally just to discover that it was a little shorter, so that the right shoe that I wear now has inside of it an elevation, so that it wouldn't make me walk in that manner anymore as I get older.
So you won't have the young boy bump then?
I don't have the young boy bump in the same kind of a way. But that is, so is your Digo always used to remind me of it, He was a good man, your grandfather, very, very good man. And his father, that is to say your grandfather named Busul Warakan, he was a carpenter. And people never used to keep the dead because you didn't have funeral homes. So you die in the night or in the morning or anything like that. Before sun is down, you getting buried because you'll get breadfruit board, cedar, maybe, but mainly breadfruit. They'll have some handles in the area and they'll put them on. And people will drink rum and eat pillau or coconut boiling while they're making the box, while they're making the casket. Well, it's not casket, it's really a simple box. And that was your great-grandfather, who incidentally was married to a woman who had a Madeiran heritage, Portuguese heritage, she was related to my mommy side of the family. So you and I are related.
No, that wasn't the purpose of asking the question.
No, but I just want to say that we it's a long way through your great grandmother, but still.
Okay. As a young boy prime minister, growing up in Connery with all your exploits and so forth, did you ever think that you would become prime minister of this beautiful country of St. Vincent and the Grenadines?
Never. I'll tell you the story. In December 2000, when I went to see my father, who was by then ailing. I went to see him often, but went to see him for the Christmas. And he had sugar. Thank God I don't have it. And he had a prostate problem. Dr. Cyrus tells me that if you live long enough as a man, you'll either die from a prostate problem or you'll die with it. He told me that God is a woman because she gave women She gave women a temporary problem in their 50s, some hot flushes, which they get over.
And younger, you know.
But in compensation, he gave men a, a prostate problem, which I say, if you live long enough, you die. According to him, you'll die either with it or from it. But he suggested how, because I asked him how you can delay, could I delay dying from it? How can I avoid dying from it and delay dying with it? He had suggested two solutions, and I'm coming back to my father, but I just deal with the prostate since Cecil Cyrus is such an icon. He wouldn't mind me giving this joke. I said, well, how can I do this? What are the prescriptions? He gave 2 prescriptions. The first one, I wouldn't speak on family radio. I told him that I'm sorry that first prescription may not have applicability to me. But the second one was tomatoes. When I told him, well, the first prescription, I don't think that is applicable anymore to me. He said, well, there's no problem, just double up on the tomatoes. So I've been eating lots of tomatoes since his advice 2 or 3 years ago. So my father, when I went to see him for Christmas, this is 2000, and you remember the Grand Beach Accord that happened in May, and we knew that the elections were going to be as part of the agreement by the end of March. He said to me, comrade, because my mother called me comrade, my father, and he said to me, they tell me that you're going to win the election, that you're going to be the next prime minister. I said, well, I hear so too. He said, Ralph, I'm going home. He said, but I'm going to wait until the election because I want to live to see you become prime minister. He said, because after one time is a next. He said, I never expect that my son would become prime minister. He said, because in the old days, we saw the administrator passing, and you never know that the country going to be independent anyway. Colonialism was appearing to be just and permanent. At least that is the message which they gave. He says, so I'm waiting. And he was taken to the polling station. He died in July of 2001. So he saw me assume the office. He wasn't well enough to come when I was sworn in or at the parliament, but he'd have listened it on radio and he was very pleased about it. Because after all, he had left school at class 3 in the primary school to go and work as an agricultural worker to Joe Garroot and his donkey and Montwilliam Estate. So there was no expectation, and when I was a boy, it didn't cross my mind. Of course, later on, I wasn't thinking of prime minister. I was thinking about just being involved politically. By the time I had become a teenager, a youngster going off to university, and so on. But I really, when I was a boy, that wasn't inside of my mind.
Okay, and describe how you felt when you took the oath of office as prime minister for the first time in March of 2000.
Well, I will tell you. Well, it was the transfer of authority in a democratic society is fascinating. Brent Black, who had provided security for me during the 2001 election. In fact, from the end of 2000, and he drove me and Eloise up to Government House on the Thursday morning to be sworn in by Sir Charles Antrobus, the Governor General. And when I was sworn in, after I was sworn in, I came out back. Well, there was a little small reception which the Governor General had. He and his dear wife, Lady Antrobus. And when I came outside, I was going towards my Mitsubishi Jeep. And Latham, who subsequently became an inspector, he retired at the rank of inspector. He was then either a corporal or a sergeant. He was driving the Prime Minister's vehicle, the Prime Minister's car. So I was going to the vehicle, he called to me. Well, Latham is a man who used to come around by the meetings and call me comrade and everything. And as I was going, he said, Prime Minister, please come here. This is the vehicle you have to go in. Well, I went into the vehicle. Of course, my vehicle was much better than the Prime Minister's car. And I had the incident when we came out from Government House, coming down the road, just by the curb, the new building for CWSC hadn't quite been built up yet. And in the grass curb there, as we drive in, I hear ting-a-ling, ting-a-ling. So I say, what happened there, man? Is the hubcap which drop off? So off the car, so I had to come out. I had to come out with fellas and looking in the bush to find the hubcap.
So that was really your first business as Prime Minister?
To look for the hubcap. But we used for quite a while my Mitsubishi vehicle, the SUV, until they bought a new car,
right,
a new vehicle. For the Prime Minister, but I became very much a political activist at the University of the West Indies. I became president of the Students' Union, very active, took part in led the famous Rodney demonstration when Walter Rodney was banned from returning to Jamaica. And I marked my political involvement from October the 16th, 1968. So this year would be 47 years, October the 16th. That's not a bad date on which to call the election, eh?
Well, Prime Minister...
that's not a bad date at all when you come to think of it. A nice little anniversary there, 47th anniversary for the comrade on October the 16th. Or some a date close to that. I don't know whether October the 16th is a Saturday or Sunday or Friday or whatever.
Johnny P. October 16th. Let's get it. Let's It's a Friday. It's a Friday.
It can't be
for many reasons. It can be.
It can't be on a Friday because I have to respect the Seventh-day Adventists. Because the sun would go down and the Sabbath. We wouldn't want that. So maybe the Thursday, the 15th, when Walter was banned, and when I organized the protest on that evening, and enjoy the fourth-term victory on the 16th. That's not a bad idea, So that's a possibility.
And you heard it first on an evening with the Prime Minister.
And that means I have to make the announcement pretty soon because I'll have to make it pretty soon if that is the thing, because I wouldn't want to give more than 1 month, and today is the 9th. So if so of course I'm still listening to the Lord. But in as much as we are talking, right. I said, and in the lightness of this discussion, but my own education and training helped me to come to where I am. It is so, life is so strange. And opportunities come by. in those days, 250 boys, maybe a little more, across St. Vincent would write the grammar school exam. There's a special exam, and you only have 30 boys who are taking it, who are being taken in. And I remember going to the mountain with my father. He riding one donkey, I ride in the next. And not everybody would go and write the exam. They would do pre-selection, certainly out in Connery School, where I was. And my father would say to me, well, they say you're very bright in Connery School, but you think you can make it with all the boys from all over the country? And I will tell him, yes, of course I could make it, but in my mind, you kind of have a little worry because it's only 30. And I went to all my years at Connery School, from the time I'm 5 years old till I was 12. I went to school barefooted. But when I was to go for the exam, when they told me, when the teacher Stephen told me I have to go and write the exam, my mommy came to town and buy a hard shoe, and she measured my foot with a piece of string. Of course, the string is not the best instrument with which to measure your foot. So could you imagine, when she bring it back, it's squeezing me a little bit. And the wooden buses you come to town with, because there's one place you had the exam at the grammar school, the old building, because the 2-3-story building hadn't been built yet. That was completed in 1964, and I went into the 6A in that building during Joshua government. And I had to walk from the road here by the Richmond Hill and go across, and I walk and go into the exam, hippity hop like I got turbo, and it's squeezing my foot. And when I got to the exam room, I had the presence of mind to take off my shoe, take off my socks, and write my exams barefooted, the way I'd written all exams hitherto. If I didn't do that, I'm sure I would not have done well enough to be in the top 30 boys to go into the grammar school. And my father would have accepted it. Well, he'd have said, well, boy, Ralph, they say you're bright in Connery, but you go and you pass your exam, therefore you got to come plant banana with me, because that's what you used to call banana. You got to come plant banana with me. And I probably, well, in all probability, I would not have been here. This is why you see I'm so strong on the education revolution and open opportunities for people. So it's a commitment and a passion.
Thank you.
Then I came to grammar school. I will not forget.
You got a cloud?
Yes. I remember when I was in Form 6, 6B, Ulrich Crick, Barbadian headmaster, UG Crick. I went to him for us to start a school steel band. So he chased me from his office. Gonzales, you have turned my school into the market square. Now you want to turn it into a dance hall. Because, many of us had been arguing and politics, social events, and over the period, social issues, And then I went did my, what they used to call senior Cambridge. Then I did my A-levels. Senior Cambridge is what subsequently became O-levels and what then became CXC. I went to university, enrolled, and did do a Bachelor of Science degree in economics. and specialized in government and administration, though I had to do economics courses too, and a number of other things in the social sciences, broad kind of a degree. Then I did the master's at UWI. Actually, I'd done well. I was student of the year, both for academic and non-academic work, because I was a champion debater. I played cricket, I played steel band, and I did very well. In fact, in government, in that particular specialty, I'd been the top student. So I had a scholarship at UWI. I had a scholarship to go. I had one also to go to the Autonomous University of Mexico, and I had one to go to an American university. And it was no contest really. I decided to stay at UWI, largely not so much because I was as interested in doing another 2 years at UWI to do my master's degree, but I was in love with Camilo's mommy. So I let my heart, I was a young, they may say that I was a young fool in love and now an old fool still in love, but you never know how life turns. If I had gone, for instance, to Mexico, I might have been there. I might have found the Mexican senorita, or I might have gone to the United States. I would have stayed there. You never know with life, and what God has mapped out for you. There are a number of things, and it takes you there. And then I won a scholarship to do a PhD in government at the University of Manchester, and I did law also at Gray's in London. And part of my work, I did my PhD was an area of the political economy of Uganda, from colonialism to Amin. And I spent a year at Makerere University in Kampala, Uganda. In fact, I'm the only head of government currently outside of Africa who attended an African university. I have a lot of friends in Uganda. I knew Museveni, who is the current president. He had left Uganda and went to Tanzania, and I went to Tanzania to play cricket for Makerere at the East and Central African Championships. Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, the main universities. And then, after my PhD, I went back to UWI. I was given a job at UWI Mona. And then after 2 years, they were opening up to teach particular courses in government at Cave Hill. And I was given the job to go down there. And I worked there for 3 years, 1976 to 1979. I was very active. And I took a sabbatical, a year, no pay leave, to come home to be involved in the first elections after independence. I came home in June, June, July 1979. And we had the elections in December under the United People's Movement ticket. And then shortly after the election, my work permit was revoked by the Tom Adams government in Barbados. I used to be very critical of his government. I used to write a newspaper column involving lots of public discussion and the like. And I lost my job, but then I was 1979, I was a young man, 33 years of age, had a wife, had a son, I don't have a job, nothing to fall back on. I got a job as a visiting professor at City University of New York at Queens College. And I went back to England and did the final year for the bar, and came home and practiced law for 20 years before I became Prime Minister. So I have a wide and varied background of training in economics, which I still read quite a lot, in government, in administration, in philosophy, in law. So I have a really a varied background. You know, I tell you, if you read the book of Daniel, you will find that Daniel, who was he was an Israelite, and he was in Babylonian captivity in Persia. Nebuchadnezzar and Darius, king, and young men were selected to be trained, and Daniel was one of those. And he trained for 3 years. He was trained, if you read the book of Daniel, he was trained in the language and philosophy of the Babylonians. Of course, you'd have had a comparative knowledge of Judaism from the ancient prophets. And he was marked out as a leader of exceptional ability. So what is important with the training is that you get a broad training and you have the experiences to hone your judgment and you apply your heart to wisdom. You don't require, for the job that I'm doing, a degree in law, engineering, economics, medicine. What you need to have is a good, broad scientific education. And philosophy helps, and marrying faith and reason, and having the right experiences, and know how to have proper advisors. And you yourself continuously study in all areas of government to educate yourself and to sharpen your judgments and to make sure you believe in certain things. You see, there's some people, when they talk, they really don't believe in much. If they were fashioning the 10 Commandments, they'd call them the 10 Concerns or the 10 Suggestions. But there are some things you just have to believe in, and you have to combine faith and reason. But it was quite a journey in political terms. I mean, I tell you, the work that I did politically from the 1970s, you know, politics on the street and the communities and the experiences, being in the wilderness for a long time, helped me. And I always reflect Moses and Joshua and David and the prophet Bill and Nehemiah and Paul, servant of the Lord called to be an apostle, had wilderness years. Of course, I can't compare myself to these persons because I am way too insignificant to make that comparison. I was only talking about the issue of making sure that when you have your wilderness years, you use them wisely. Prepare yourself well and to have above all else a profound love for people. I tell all the youngsters, when Camilo told me that he was interested in politics, to come, because Clayton, Bergen, and Sir Louis and Vincent Beach pushed him. Not me, contrary to what people believe. My advice to him, if you're interested, you have to come home, but don't get involved in this thing unless you know in your heart that you love people. Same thing I told Saboto, I told Luke, I told the humble African, I told Jomo, I told Carlos. You could be bright, you could be well trained, but you have to have love for people. And you see, there are a lot of people who parade their brightness. You know, there are two kinds of brightness. There's a brightness which blinds and a brightness which illuminates. When you're leaving here tonight, if you put on your beam and the man opposite you who driving puts on his beam, both of you are very bright, but all you can't see anything and you're going to have a crash. So you have to have a brightness which illuminates, which clears the pathway. So a lot of people, when you hear they tell you, boast and tell you how bright they are, and they remind you every minute of the day that they have a PhD, or they were doing a PhD and they're getting involved in politics, and they remind you all the time. And you know, people like these don't understand what true knowledge is, and judgment and wisdom and understanding. It's 41 years now that I have a PhD. And if you don't remind me on a daily basis, I don't remember it, because that's not important. And you have to have love for people, and that is something which you can't boast about. You either have it and people see it, or you don't have it. And if you have it, people are prepared, even when, as a human being, your imperfections show up. People stay with you because they know that you have love in your heart, and you apply your heart to wisdom. And that is not something which you can fake. It's either you have it or you don't have it. And people will see it in every single different way. And the experience which I have, I mean, I tell you, is every single, I mean, I'm the only politician in this country who has participated in every single election since independence as a candidate. The 36 years this year of elections.
Independence.
Of independence, but 36 years of electoral participation by me. And the experience and the training I've had, and the interaction with people, and the learning that I've gotten from ordinary people, from old Mr. Doyle, through thousands of people today, young and old. You don't buy that knowledge and experience on a supermarket shelf as if it is cornflakes. And people know it when people didn't know it when they see it, and you don't have to boast about it. You don't have to do anything like that at all. And the journey has, I mean, it wasn't a case where if I didn't become Prime Minister, I would have made my contribution by lifting consciousness in the community, doing a number of things. I had a life, and after this job, I'm hopeful that I have a life still, and I hope when I leave that I leave behind no unfinished task.
Well, we will definitely get into that aspect of the discussion a little later on. I see the telephone lines are going, Prime
Yes.
Minister, and we're going to take some calls in
Okay.
a bit. This, of course, is an evening with Prime Minister Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, the lighter side of the Prime Minister. Just before we
I
take
just want to say this. People, a very good learning experience in life is being in a family and having children. It's of course there are humorous things. I mean, Camilla, for instance, came up by the office a few months ago. He said, "I have something here for you, a red Converse." So I said to him, "A red Converse." I say, "I understand the verb converse, from which the abstract non-conversation follows." I mean, I didn't know that there was something called a Converse, called a shoe. I learned the songs and so on, and many things from the children, the young ones who come by and who I interact with. And of course, I've been fortunate to have two mothers of my children. And, and Eloise has been tremendous in helping me and being with me and standing by me through a lot of difficulties and problems and challenges. And you need that too, eh? And of course, faith. And in life too, I had a young son who died in 1981. In 1980, in June 1980, and a window of life opens up to you, and you begin to reflect on the importance and meaning of life, and to deal with tragedy, and so on and so forth. It's a multiplicity of things which make up who you are, and of course the interaction with people. The North Central Windward, for instance, has been so good to me. And that's why I say that even when I'm finished with this next term, God's willing, and the people express the will of God, that in 2020 I would be 74 years of age. And if I'm in good health still, and the people of North Central want me to continue as their representative, even though I would not lead the party again, this is my last election as party leader. Of course, Ronald Reagan became president close to his mid-70s.
Yeah.
But I'm not. And Mr. Eustace wants to have his first crack at prime minister, elected prime minister at 71 plus. It's a hell of a thing. I wish him well. You don't come to these things for the first time at these ages. It doesn't make sense.
Prime Minister.
Either for him or for the people. And North Central has been very good to me.
Okay. Just before we take our very first call, there is a question that begs to be answered. Let's look at a day in the life of a prime minister. When you came this evening, you spoke about having a very full day, and you're more than likely going to be here till 10. Now, this looks like after 10, huh?
Yes.
Right. How do you prepare for a day at work?
Well, I tell people, if you, whoever you're going to elect as prime minister after me, make sure that they're strong in mind and body. You have to endure long hours. I get up around 4:30 and I begin my day around that time. And I have a routine, and I get to the office by 7:30 in the mornings. Usually I will at 4:30 I will go into my study, I have myself a cup of coffee, and I begin to read the newspapers on the internet. I'm not a social media person. You don't find me making any posts, and I don't read social media. The simple reason is this, that the commodity which I have, which is very valuable to me, is time, and it's diminishing. Therefore, I try not to waste my time. And I'd read newspapers in the Caribbean. They made the newspapers from Trinidad, Jamaica, Barbados, St. Lucia, all the papers really which are online. I'll read the British newspapers, the Guardian, the Telegraph, the Independent, even the Mail. I'd look at journals like the New Statesman, Spectator. I'd look at Monthly Review Press, the Monthly Review magazine, the Left magazine in the U.S., Time, the New York Times, the Washington Post. And I asked them to bring for me my breakfast around 6:15. So I'm a creature of habit. So in the arc between 6:15 and 6:13, I then have my ginger tea with cayenne pepper and apple cider vinegar,
Moringa,
and invariably moringa bush with some balanja in it, and tomato naturally, and cucumber. And 2 mornings out of every 7, I will have an egg for the protein. Then I go and get myself ready and go to work. Sometimes I stop off early with my reading and begin to make calls at around 6 o'clock. People who have called me the previous day whom I didn't get to, and I have a list of them, and I try and get as many as possible. I get down at 7:30, and Vincent Beach and P.S. Pompey will come in and see me. Angie, the executive secretary, will be there at office. I start to work. And I work through the day with meetings and all kinds of activities. And I mean, today, for instance, I went down, I had appointments this morning, then I went to a function, the Police Welfare Association down at Methodist Church. All came back, did cabinet, had soup for lunch, but saw persons during the lunch period. In fact, one of them even had a cup of my soup while we were talking. She and her coach, and then I work. I went home this evening a little earlier than usual, around 5:30, and had my dinner. Basically an ITEL dinner this evening, and showered, put on my clothes, ready to come here, but I had about an hour and a quarter to spare. So I started to review the manifesto for 2015, which is already written. I'm ready to roll, I'm ready to roll. I'm ready to rumble. I'm really ready to rumble. And so, and I love elections. I love them. And that's, and when I'm finished here tonight, I'll going back to do some work, because they sent up for me some files from the office which came in, including the day's correspondence, which I have to deal with. So that anything which I have to write, Angie could have it. She and Karen early in the morning to work on, and so on and so forth. It's read papers, read the documentation of this or that policy issue. And that's how my day is. Tomorrow another one similarly, except that tomorrow there's going to be a very enjoyable activity at 3 o'clock. 3:30 I'll be down in Barley with Montgomery Daniel and Louis and Maxwell, handing out titles to land. You know, that's always a very enjoyable thing. And as we get closer to the elections, my pecan gets a little sharper. So I will have fun tomorrow, as you will hear. And that's how it's done. On Friday, I go to Antigua in the morning and come back in the evening for the LIAT meeting. On Saturday, I have a number of things to do. In the morning, in the afternoon, I have to be in my constituency, and there's a Creole evening on Saturday evening up in Georgetown by the party office, which the young people and the central and the constituency council put together. And then I sleep in Goss. I spend time in the constituency on Sunday, but Sunday night, Sunday evening, 6 o'clock, I'm in Sharps. You know, I have to deal with Leacock and Eustace in Sharps on Sunday evening. You know, so the people, I'm inviting them to come there. They're going to hear some things from me about some of the things which they said. They talk a lot of rubbish. You know, they're getting so desperate. They're unraveling. They're unraveling real badly. And they're looking more and more ragged. They don't look as anything close to any kind of government. I mean, on Saturday night, their feature speaker was Zion I. You know, their feature speaker. Could you imagine that? I mean, it's just pure rubbish. And he talked a lot of rubbish, because I listened to some of what he had to say before I went up Sion Hill to have solidarity with Luke. Luke had an event at Sion Hill. So those are the, I mean, and I have to be dealing with Julian, and who is General Secretary and Campaign Manager, and making sure that everything is in place. And of course, additional things come to me because ISIS is now working at the Attorney General's chambers as a Crown Counsel. And she always has legal issues which she wants to talk to me about after I already have a hard day at the office. And I was asking her, you can't get up, wait until tomorrow morning when my mind fresh to raise complex legal issues with me. But you know, she's young and enthusiastic, so she can't wait. So I have to listen to her and proffer advice.
Well, it's a nice marriage between the family life and the politics and everything.
Yeah, and of course, Dinis will come by. He's away now, but in the mornings he'd come by for about half an hour, 40 minutes, and do some workout with me to try and keep me in shape. So I try to do everything in a good balance, but my days are really filled, and when I have particular activities, as you notice, there's a paper which on typed pages, the A4 pages, It was 40-something pages. You saw it was several pages in the newspaper, and a piece which I did on theology, the church, and politics, a Caribbean perspective, for the 40th anniversary of the priesthood of Father Monsignor Blackett in Barbados. And many things you have to do. I have to work on my speech, for 2 speeches for the United Nations. One, a speech on millennium, on the post 2015 development dialogue, and then the General Assembly speech, and lots of other things in between. And I have a speech to do on the 23rd of October in at Miami, Florida International University in the USA, on the Eric Williams Memorial Lecture. Well, that one, if the elections are on the 15th, that one will be within the first week after I'm re-elected Prime Minister. So I have my schedule well set up, and then I'll have to be preparing the estimates to go to the House in December or January for the year 2016, in which I hope to have an increase for the public servants in those estimates, and so on and so forth. So I have my agenda working out.
Prime Minister, you noticed when you said that the smiles of the...
Yeah. I saw that.
You saw that.
I saw that.
It's really a good time for us to now invite you. Thank you so much for listening to the conversation we're having. And it's a good